Good afternoon. It's now 6 o'clock on a Tuesday. Yes, the 9th of June. Just Tuesday. Yes, it is. And I'm delighted. We're talking about non-fiction today. So I'm delighted that we have Andy Woolhead, who has been on quite a few of these now. So our resident non-fiction, one of our resident non-fiction authors, and Malcolm, this is his first. So we're going to be kind to you, Malcolm. I'm not going to throw too many questions at you, but these are always informal anyway. So feel free and it's all about you and your books. So feel free to marketing for you. So Andy is going to go first to introduce herself and talk about her book that is out and the follow-up that she's currently working on. And then I'll hand over to Malcolm, who has two books out and is currently, he's just told me, working on his ebooks for these two books. So Andy, lovely to
Oh,
see you.
hello, and thank you for having me on again.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I'm the writer of just one book, and this is it, if you can see it. And it's the story of a major general who worked for Assad's government and ended up in one of his prisons. So it's a true story, and it takes in quite a lot about sort of Syrian culture and Syrian history. I published it last year. It's been doing quite well. And it's been a really good learning process, sort of getting a whole book together and getting the book out. So that's my book.
Mm.
Beneath title is
Beneath the Regime,
beneath the regime.
Beyond the Fear.
Have you got a title for your second one?
Yeah, the sequel at the moment.
Oh, okay.
I,
Working
I think
title.
I've actually sort of got the picture, sort of the idea of the picture, because the family home is just rubble.
Mm,
And NASA's taken some pictures of it. I would really like to build that into the background of the cover.
mm.
So maybe out of the rubble, I don't know.
Oh, yes.
You like the
Yeah,
idea?
I do. So
Oh, thank
this
you.
as the subtitle, even if it's not the main title.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that idea.
Okay, well, it really is,
Yes. No,
Syria
exactly.
is sort of coming
Yeah.
out of just rubble.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Malcolm, good evening.
Good evening. Good
And welcome.
evening. Good
We've
evening.
done a spotlight together, but this is your first panel.
Thank
So
you.
it's
It's
lovely,
very good to be with you and with
lovely to have
Andy
you
as
here.
well. And I don't know if I can top a story about Syria. I mean, especially with what that country has been through under the Assad regime, and even now, it's from what one hears, it's not necessarily a lot better. So maybe there's a sequel, perhaps. Andrea. Is that- Yes,
Yes, there is. Yes, Andy's working on a sequel with NASA.
right.
Yes.
But it is fascinating. I mean, I have an interest in overseas places. I lived in Africa for a number of years, and then the first book I wrote, which was completed about 8 years ago, was set in Africa, not in a country I knew particularly well.
Mm,
And I wrote it because I'd inherited the photographs albums of a great uncle who'd served in the colonial service in what was then Northern Rhodesia.
mm,
And having inherited his photograph albums and realized how much detail there was there, including serving in World War One in Africa, where there was actually a very significant war, although obviously the worst losses were in Europe. There was a significant war going on, particularly in East Africa, of which he was part and very much involved. And so, in exploring his photographs and his life, I hope I've managed to portray some of the horrors actually of that war going on all across East Africa at that
mm,
time.
mm,
So that was my first book, and then, as you know, more recently, last autumn, I published my second book, Alec,
mm,
which was the story of my father, the father I barely knew, which is something I wanted to write because it was only quite uh, late in my life that I found out my father had been married before and that I had a family. on through his. I had a half brother uh, born from my father's first marriage, and all of that proved quite fascinating. And also how he met my mother, who was much younger than him, how they fell in love, and the decisions he made, the moral decision to leave his apparently comfortable life in Worthing, running a hotel, all very steady and nice, for a bit of an unknown life with a younger woman just as World War II was breaking out, and then moving to London and having to reinvent his career and become a father again in his 50s. So that was been good. And it's the story of my journey, I think, particularly with that one, I would like to get across to potential readers. Going on this journey of exploration and not being quite sure what you'll find out.
Right.
Some things might be embarrassing, some things might be difficult.
Yeah.
But I think once you've started on that journey, it's difficult to stop, actually.
Yes. No, absolutely. I mean, in theory, it's easier than writing fiction, because I don't know if I know Andy's has written some or is in the process of writing some fiction. But because you're both writing, I mean, Andy has the advantage that she has her subject is still with us, and so it's easier for her in a way, because she can ask any questions that she's got. Malcolm, did you find that because obviously you've got family still alive, and people who know the story, did you find there were certain things that you either changed so that it would, as we say, protect the innocent, or think, well, this is fine, it needs to be told, I need to include it as it is? Did you find at any point that you were thinking, well,
Well,
okay, maybe I shouldn't do
you've
this?
got on to a sensitive point there, actually, very quickly. I have had a lot of help over the last 20, 30 years from my half niece.
Right.
So when I was in my 20s, I found out I had a half brother, Eric. He was 30 years older than me. He lived in Worthing. He'd taken on the hotel business from my father, and we became great mates.
Oh, good.
And I saw a lot of him until he died in his mid-80s.
Right.
Eric had two daughters who are about my age, and I've known them quite well over the years. One, though, lives in Canada, so I see her only infrequently. I've seen her in Canada a couple of times. But the other one lives in the West Country. And over the years, we've had a good friendship, and she's been very helpful to me with photographs in particular that she'd inherited from her father, which are fascinating. But what I was also doing in parallel with that was finding out, particularly from newspaper cuttings, what was actually going on in Worthing. Now, my father's earlier life in the city, but then in Worthing as a hotelier.
Okay.
And my father, my brother, father with it, and his son Eric, were living in Worthing. And then after my father died, Eric continued in Worthing and took on the hotels. But during the war, after Eric was already married and had two daughters, who are my half nieces, he met somebody in the war with whom he fell in love, an RAF officer, a very intelligent woman, and they had an affair for some years, and she became his hotel manager.
Right.
For 15 years in Worthing while he was still married to his wife, also living in Worthing about a mile away. So he had this double life for some years.
Wow.
And it all ended in two divorces, which are public knowledge in the sense that the court cases, especially we're talking now late 50s, early 60s, court reporters would thrive on going to a divorce court and taking down all the detail of who did what to whom and when and where and how. And you can read it all up if you go to the newspaper archives. So when I found this out, I did talk to my stepniece about it, and she said, oh yes, it was all very messy. She said, you won't put that in the book, will you? And I said, well, I better not.
No.
And then as I was coming towards publication, I'd been through various drafts, and I omitted. Now, this was a sin of omission, to go back to her with the final draft and say, "Is this all right?"
Mm.
And I'll be honest, she's not happy. She's not happy about it. I
Mm.
hope we will restore our relationship, but it has been
Yeah.
a consequence. Now, I don't think you referred to covering something like that, Morgan, but I don't know if you'd read that specific page. It's one page out of 400. There
Mm.
are other stories of divorces and messy things and criminality amongst people the family knew, not amongst my own family, thank goodness, but amongst people they knew. Um, and life over a period of years, it can be messy for some people, and most families have got some black sheep somewhere.
Mm.
So perhaps I should have left it out. And then I've been thinking about it, and then I thought, well, I don't think it's that bad, and I think it is what happened. It
Yeah.
is factual. There's no doubt about that. I don't
Yeah.
think so.
But don't you think it's like layers of an onion? You're at the heart of the onion, and most people only see the brown skin on the outside of the onion,
Mm.
and it takes a lot to sort of peel those layers back and let people see the sort of the raw inside of it.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't think I could ever write about myself because I would never want anybody to know everything that I've done. And I can fully understand why it's quite painful to have your story or bits of your story for everybody to read and make judgments about you.
Yes,
So
you're right.
yes, yeah,
Maybe people are doing that, although of all the people who have been kind enough to come back to me, who have read the book or parts of it, because it is a detailed book,
Mm.
nobody's actually picked up on this particular story, part of the story.
yeah.
I think
So
the main
yes, you're right. In theory, anyone could read it,
mm.
but in practice, I'm not sure that many people have or would dwell on it.
I think the thing is, if your book is on Amazon, then the likelihood of anybody who actually knows you or knows your father of reading it proportionately, um, obviously you could sell copies worldwide, and the chances of people that who of reading it, unless it were in a local bookshop or it's tricky, isn't it? Because if she's asked you not to, um, but if it's relevant, it is. This is the thing about non-fiction, and also if it's so sensational, if we put that as a fictional book, people would read it and they'd leave a review on Amazon and say, well, there was this chapter about such and such, and it was so unbelievable that just
Yeah, I don't think in this day and age, especially, you can say a divorce case is that unusual.
no,
Yes, there was a lot of detail, and I'm divorced myself, and thank goodness there was nothing in the press about it.
yeah,
Uh, but I mean, even if there was, you wouldn't gain a lot from what we said to each other and what went in the divorce papers.
no,
We did it as amicably as possible in the end.
mm,
So, and you will find my first wife credited in acknowledgements for having helped with the family history. Yeah.
right, right.
So,
Really, because really both books aren't they, about your first one is about your great uncle on the whole, and
yeah,
obviously people he's interacted with,
yes,
and then the second book is about your father on the whole and
yes,
people who've come into his life.
yes, yes.
Did you learn anything? I'll ask Malcolm and then Andy. Did you learn anything? I mean, I think from getting, certainly with your great uncle, getting photographs, and then you then started your investigation. There were things you found out that you really didn't know at the beginning from your research.
Yes, I think with both lives, I've been more impressed of what they achieved, and particularly the environment and the times in which this happened. I mean, if you go back, in both cases, we're going back to the early years of the 20th century and through the 1920s, 1930s.
mm,
Um, Social attitudes were very different from now. Um, and it's particularly in the colonial stories, I mean, I think actually, I would argue that Britain's colonial record isn't that bad. We
right.
did a lot to help with education and building roads, putting in justice systems and so on.
Mm,
It's not everybody's viewpoint, especially in this day and age, but I would not condemn it. I'm not saying it was perfect,
mm,
but I found investigating and looking at that whole story and how individuals uh, did their day-to-day jobs and how they interacted with people of all sorts of shapes and sizes,
mm,
in many ways with the African population, very benevolently and very caring for their well-being and for their improvement.
mm,
So I found that part of it interesting. And in fact, because as you know, Northern Rhodesia and Southern Rhodesia were named after roads. Cecil Rhodes is a character that some people would paint black, some people would paint white, but actually, like most people, there were shades of grey.
mm,
And he's an interesting man to look at in terms of what he achieved and his ambition to build a railway from the Cape Town to Cairo, right the length of Africa. It
right.
never happened, but the ambition was there.
Yes.
So those sort of stories as background to the individuals and what they did at the time and how they lived,
Mm,
I find fascinating as well.
mm,
That's Tolstoy's view of history, isn't it? History being made by the small man.
Yes, yes, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I had NASA by my side as I was writing the book, so I'd ask him questions. We would record what he said. I would go and type it, and I would put a very Western slant on what Syria was like. And then he would say that he didn't want this in the book, or that was too detailed, or he didn't want that person's name mentioned. So things got edited and changed as we went along. And sometimes he would say, take it away, and then ask me to put it back in again afterwards.
mm,
So it was a lot of negotiation that went in. There were a lot of individuals who he came across, obviously, in the story. Some of the more famous ones or notorious ones get their full name. But people he was at prison with, just had their given name and not their family name. And I think in Arab culture there are far fewer range of names than there are in our Western culture. So it could be one of a number of people, I'm sure.
mm.
So
And
we're not sort of highlighting anybody that doesn't deserve
no, no.
that spotlight.
And did you find, because obviously you would have had an idea of Syria before you met NASA. I know you've known him for quite some time.
Yeah.
Um, but did you kind of learn having, because obviously I only know Syria from what I see on the television. I've never been there.
Mm.
And I know you've travelled extensively. Um,
Yeah.
did you have an idea of the country and the people and the regime before you met him, and then realised actually what we're told then is not exactly how it is and
Well,
not
it's
truthful?
quite interesting, really. Before I went there, I had a quick sort of glance at the Lonely Planet guide to Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon to see what was in it. And then I went over there and I was working there for 4 months. So I was determined to sort of get around and see places.
Mm,
And I think I liked, well, Damascus particularly, more than any other place I visited because, it's the oldest continually inhabited city in the world. And it's got its layers of history, and there's just no tourism. It's just there in front of you, and it's accepted. And then just further out from the city centre are sort of almost sort of Russian style blocks, Soviet blocks. There's been a big Soviet influence inside Syria through the links with Hafez Assad and later with Bashar al-Assad.
mm,
So, there's a sort of a very stark sort of um, suburbs to the centre of town. But
Mm.
you know, people are so friendly, and I think because there aren't tourists, they're so natural. And I actually fell in love with the place. I met NASA because when I travel with my tennis rackets, and even now I play tennis.
Why
Um,
not? Why not? Good on you.
so why laugh? As long as I keep winning, I keep playing.
Oh,
And NASA was the person who invited me to play tennis with him and his friends, and that's how I got to know him
oh,
better than sort of lots of other people.
mm,
We would, you know, I had an induction when I went there of all the things that you cannot talk about, you know, and that there are spies everywhere. So automatically, whenever you're around, you're going, I wonder if that's the spy. I wonder if that's the spy. So, you know, you've got to sort of have your antenna up. And I never sort of imagined that sort of NASA was one of the people working for intelligence.
mm,
Um, yeah, so I got friendly with him. I got to learn lots about sort of the underbelly of Syria and the ideas of it. But the thing that I think I've learned most about it is through writing the book and researching the book, because I always had to look for two or three different proofs of what he told me.
yeah.
And I've since read a history of Syria, which confirms everything that I've got. I double checked things and double checked people's names and spellings before they went in the book, and looked at the background of them as well, so that you know what went into the book, as far as I am aware of, is well a generally accepted truth.
Mm,
I won't say it's the truth because we don't ever know what the truth is, do we?
no. But we aren't
So
we lucky being an author now because because back in the day we used to have a list and go down to the library and go upstairs to the or downstairs into the
yeah,
cellar for the
yeah,
reference section.
yeah, yeah.
Whereas
And
now we just tap a few buttons and
I know,
have
yeah,
the
yeah.
world at
We
our
start looking
fingertips.
at Encyclopedia Britannica and then find something more interesting than the thing you're
Right.
actually looking for. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yes, but the thing that now, I mean, when Syria pops up in the news, and with both sort of what's happening with Trump and Israel in the region,
Mm.
um, I feel that I've got quite a strong insight into sort of how it's being misreported.
Mm.
And it is being misreported. And I'll give a very good example of this. In the northeastern part of Syria, there was the Syrian Democratic Forces. Now, you would think they're good people,
Mm.
and they were mostly Kurdish, but there were some Arabs and other ethnic groups within that group.
Mm.
But the Americans had asked them to make that their name
Oh,
because it made it acceptable for them to receive money and arms.
wow.
But I think you might know the PKK and the PYG.
Right. I have heard of them, yes.
Yeah, well, they're PKK, a known terrorist group inside Turkey.
Right.
And the Syrian Democratic Forces grew out of those people, and they were there to keep ISIS at bay.
Right.
And at one point, America was arming both the Syrian Free Army, which is now the main Syrian army
Mm.
under al Sharaa, and the Syrian Democratic Forces. And then back in January, um, the Syrian army went and took that land and took complete control of it. So it's most of Syria is now under one control, not different factions of control. And
Yeah.
people were happy about it. But it was reported in the news in a very negative way that, you know, ex-ISIS al-Sharaa sort of attacks the Syrian Democratic Forces in the northeast.
Right.
But the reality on the ground was very much different from that.
Yeah.
And releasing people from the ISIS camps was also not as straightforward because people got swept up and put into those camps, and they weren't ISIS people, they were just in the wrong area at the wrong time.
Yeah.
So, people aren't, it's not black and white. There's lots of
Yeah.
sort of different factions and grey areas, and our news reporting does not reflect that.
Mm.
And it's very, very easy to take sides. It's like what's happening with Israel at the moment. If anybody says anything about genocide, you're automatically labeled as being anti-Semitic.
Right.
There's no room for sort of grey areas within what really does happen on the ground. And learning about the area and writing the book has made me very much aware of that. And also, sort of, my ears prick up with other news as well, and the
Oh,
nuances that we probably lose from that as well.
yeah. So
So
have you traveled back to Syria since you wrote, or since you started the book, since you wrote the book? Have you been
has he
anywhere
or have
for
I?
research? Have you?
Have I? I
Mm.
am. I am not allowed by the British government to travel back to Syria.
Okay.
If I go there, there is no embassy there. I have no insurance cover, and if I
No,
go there, I'm going sort of rogue,
your own
basically.
free will, yeah.
But I am planning to go there,
Okay. Well,
and
it was nice knowing you.
so
Please
yes,
please get the second.
it is really on the cards. It
Right.
is happening. Yeah,
Oh,
in the fairly near future.
wow. After you've had your operation.
Yeah, I shall hop
Your,
over there.
yeah, your Achilles tendon.
Yeah, yeah.
Malcolm, did you go anywhere as part of your research? Because obviously you had a lot of information here and you had travelled to
Yes,
Africa.
yes, yes.
Um,
Just to touch on Andrew's story from
mm,
Syria, I
mm,
mean, it's not always been a problem visiting Syria. In 1971, I was doing a short consultancy study in Beirut, and at the weekend, we were taken to some of the fantastic Greco-Roman ruins in Lebanon, a place called Baalbek,
Fine. Oh,
rightly.
yeah,
And
no,
then
but
we
yeah.
went into Damascus, and I've got photographs from that visit of the most beautiful mosque in the center of Damascus. And you could go there, and I don't even remember much about the border control. We went for,
That's it. That's
right,
the one.
oh,
yeah.
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
So it's very sad what's happened there and in many other countries, because it
Mm,
wasn't always a mess.
mm.
But
Because
perhaps
it is
hopefully
tragic
coming right.
when you see the news and you see these thousands of years old um, buildings
Yeah,
or
yeah,
structures just rubble, and
Yeah.
what can you do? You can't rebuild it.
no, no. But I
Mm,
can echo Andy's comment about getting under the surface and reporting not being the full story. I mean, the
mm,
reports we see for many countries,
mm,
because for a lot of people, a lot of the time, thank goodness, life carries on as normal.
mm.
I've got a friend who lives near here in Kew, who's 88, who's now made 3 visits to Ukraine
Wow.
to take out some funding which he's raised to help in schools with IT projects
Wow.
and other necessities that wouldn't otherwise be covered.
Mm.
And he's travelled widely in Ukraine. And at 88, I think he's stopped worrying about what happens to his life. But
Wow.
I mean, he's not being stupid, but he's game for it and he's
Mm,
doing it. And
mm.
you know,
Mm.
um, I think he may have insurance, Andrea, but I'm not sure.
Well, there's a one of the main cover design companies get covers, and they're also Mibble Art, I think, is part of them. One is part of the other, and they're based in the Ukraine. And
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah. I mean, for
so,
a lot of people, a lot of the time, I'm sure in Ukraine,
yeah,
life's carrying on, and probably in
yes, I
Syria
think
too.
what else can you do? You just have to make
Yeah.
the best of an awful situation.
Yeah.
But Morgan, to come back to your question, yes,
Yes.
I think wherever possible, visit the places you're writing about.
Mm,
Okay, I've been writing a story from 100 years ago in the middle of Africa,
mm,
and some things have changed, but a lot of things haven't. And the spot where my great uncle was based, right up on the north of what is now Zambia, right on the border with Tanzania and the Congo,
Mm,
is still very remote.
mm,
And you need to go there to see just how remote it is and how difficult it is to get there.
mm,
So you can still pick up a lot of things. Okay, Lusaka, the capital, is now a big city and there's traffic jams everywhere, as you'd imagine,
mm.
and that would have changed. But get beneath the surface a bit and go and talk to people wherever you can. My wife gets fed up with me if we're traveling together. She said, "You just talk to everybody." I
Oh,
said, "Yes, but that's how you
I do.
pick up contacts and that's how you learn what's going on."
Yeah, no,
And
exactly.
that's the fun of traveling in a lot of countries.
Mm.
So yes, always travel if you can and try and get, and I mean, Worthing is not exactly a big trip from London down to Worthing, but I've been to Worthing several times. I even stayed overnight in one of the hotels my father used to own, which
Okay.
is now part of a travel lodge, but I got a room overlooking the seafront and
Oh,
had a night there. And then the next morning I got on the train to do the commute to London that he would have done and back again to Worthing. Just to get
but
the
that's the
feel
thing.
for
If
it.
you, especially if you're setting it in a real place, which obviously, if you're writing non-fiction, you
Yeah,
would do. You do have to get a feel for it. There's one of
yeah,
my books is set around Northampton, that one up there, and the one below it is Hemel Hempstead and Tring. So
right.
I based them on real areas. It's real. She was going from real location to real location
Yeah,
because I knew them.
yeah,
Otherwise, I'd make up somewhere um, in between, say, Northampton and at the time Northampton and Milton Keynes, but a fictional village. So then I know I can make up whatever I like, but still mention real places. That obviously in
yeah.
non-fiction you have to stick
I
to
mean, that
reality.
raises a fascinating question because I don't know if either of you were brought up or read much Arthur Ransom. His book,
Swallows,
Kingdom of
Amazon,
Stories, Swallows and Amazons, but
Amazons.
many other stories.
Yeah.
But although they're fiction, they are set in real places.
Mm,
And his description of the Norfolk Broads or a marshy area with some islands just near Walton on the Naze is very precise.
mm.
The Lake District, I think he moved the island in the story of Swallows and Amazons from one lake to another,
Okay.
but otherwise it's pretty much the geography as is.
Mm.
And that's half the fun, I think, of being able to go there and say, well, this is where Arthur Ransom wrote this story. So it's a mixture
Absolutely.
of fact and fiction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, when you've finished your book, or when you've decided what you're going to write about, we go Andy and then Malcolm.
yeah.
Um, Obviously, the structure of a novel, you've got start, middle, and end. You've got a main plot, and then you've got other things going on in between. How do you decide where to start? Because obviously, if you're writing a biography, you'd start with childhood and work forwards. How did you decide with NASA where to start and
Well,
then
it was
where to end with that one? Yeah.
the ending of this second book I will talk about in a minute because
Okay.
it hasn't ended, has it?
No, no,
Um,
exactly.
yeah. It was a NASA had said a long time ago he wanted me to write his story, and I said, no, no, I'm far too close to it. I won't be able to do a good job.
Mm,
And then when Assad fell on the 8th December 2024, he said, you really must write the story.
mm,
And that was the catalyst for the story, the fact that Assad had fallen and his response to it and his euphoric feeling of absolute freedom to be able to speak his mind for the first time in his life.
yeah.
So that really had to be the start of the story.
Wow.
But, why was his mouth sealed? It was the culture. So I then delved into the culture. And, and that goes back to French colonial times. And the Alawi were actually peasant farmers when the French were in charge. and the Sykes-Picot line divided Lebanon and Syria and divided his family.
Wow.
So there's lots of things that are historical that make um, his life what it was. So I sort of
Mm,
delve into that, but
right.
um, I could have written so much more about it, but I didn't want to lose the story.
Yes.
And so that's where I sort of tried to keep the that bit a little bit smaller and a little bit shorter. And and then he went through school and he had his rise to powerful places, and and how he got there and what life was like for him.
Mm,
And his disrespect for the regime, he ended up with somebody putting a gun at the back of his head.
mm,
And so that really was sort of the low mark in his story. And it was Ghazali, one of Assad's henchmen, said, I won't waste a bullet on you. I'll put you in your grave, from here on. And he was just thrown into one of his dungeons,
mm,
and he didn't know what was happening or when he would get out.
no.
I think it's unbelievable resilience. I don't think I'd have lasted 48 hours in a place with lice and stench,
Mm,
and complete isolation and not being able to hear anybody.
mm,
I just think, um, awful, awful. And he ended up really ill and dehydrated. They took him to the hospital, but the hospital didn't say anything about the state of his clothes or anything else. They just sort of rehydrated him, gave him some painkillers,
and
and
sent
put
him
him
back.
back in the, yeah,
Wow.
So we, it's just an unbelievable culture compared to what we have over here. I don't think we can actually imagine what it must have been like growing up
No.
in powder keg, uh,
Right.
boi boiling water.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to describe what it really must have been like.
Yes. So book two, do you pick up where you left off at the end
Um,
of book one?
Sort of, with a
Right.
little bit of a recap because people might not have read book one.
Hmm.
And it really is about the dilemma. NASA is very patriotic and he wants to help set up his country.
Mm,
And when he gets back into Syria, he finds out that there were 8 death warrants out against his life.
right.
And had he have turned up before Assad had fallen, he would have been killed. And he goes back, and everything looks a little bit different. He's finding his feet. He needs to meet the right people. And, El Sharaz at the top of the tree, and he's got his group around him. NASA's sort of the layer underneath in society, or was that layer underneath. So
Mm,
he's meeting with the top brass to sort of see what he can do and sort of negotiate a way back
mm,
into Syria. He's been back 3 times now, but he's also got the other problem. He's spent a long, long time away from his family, in prison, in exile, and he doesn't really want a life where his children are in one place
yes.
and he is somewhere else. So he's very torn. And so, as I said, we don't know what's going to happen, and
No.
we won't know the ending of the book until he actually makes a decision and puts both feet one side of that line.
Sure. Sure. Wow.
Yeah, but you've got the other complications of what's happening in the Middle East, and Syria,
Mm,
luckily, has stayed out of it, even though Israel are occupying Suwaida in the south of Syria.
right.
mm.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
Malcolm, your two books, were they always going to be, I say, we use the term standalones in fiction. Were they always going to be one book each? Or had you thought maybe you're
Yes, I
find
think
more.
that was certainly the intention.
Mm,
Um, but both stories have led to meeting people over the years, either because of talking about the book or they picked up the book or heard about it.
mm,
Um, in writing the first book, Ulendo, which was, I don't think Andrew's seen, but that's
yeah, yeah.
Ulendo, the
Oh,
story
yeah.
of my great uncle. The subtitle is Claude's African Journey into War and Passion. The war being World War One, which I mentioned, and the passion being an affair that he had as a single man at the time
Mm,
with the wife of a colleague, which I've spent quite a lot of time documenting as best I can because I haven't got any cast iron proof. Um, I believe that one of the daughters of Dorothy, who was the woman he had the affair with, was his. But she sadly died in her 40s and didn't have children. So there's nobody alive to do any DNA tests.
no.
Um, but along the way, the family, he had this affair with this woman called Dorothy, and her family, who I have managed to talk to, nieces and step nieces and grand nieces down the line, and a nephew living in Lincolnshire. And he had the diary, uh, typewritten diary that his great uncle had kept through the 1930s. And he's actually lent it to me. And it's sitting just in the office here.
Mm,
Uh, there's another story there. It's not directly my family. I wish I just had more hours in the day because that could make an interesting story.
yes.
But I think somehow there aren't enough hours in the day. I want to prioritize what I do. Maybe
Mm,
that one won't see the light of day. But
mm,
but things do keep coming out of the woodwork,
right.
and conversations like this.
Mm.
But you
What
also
I
asked, I think, Morgan, about with a biography, do you start at the beginning and go through to the end, especially if
mm,
the person is no longer alive? You've got a life.
mm,
You go through it: birth, education, family events, marriage, children, career,
mm.
retirement. Is that just the only way to do it? I'll be honest, I
I,
think it's the easier way, but I'd be interested to know what you feel the other possible approaches.
well, I think it depends on because obviously you've got to still have interesting things for people to read. I say there are 4 E's: that people want to be entertained from a book, educated, learn something new, feel some kind of emotion. So even though we don't know the characters in a novel, we don't know your great uncle or your father, we're still invested emotionally, and also have some kind of escape. That if something's so bad, it makes us feel that actually our life isn't as bad as that because somebody's been through worse than us. Um, but I think you have to pick out the nuggets from a person's life.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
because obviously, if you are going through sections that nothing really happened, then you wouldn't necessarily want to include or just have it as a very short interlude. This happened, then that happened. But oh, by the way, this juicy
yeah,
morsel happened. So it's I think chronological is the way. If you're encapsulating somebody's entire life, then I would say the chronological order is the norm. But it really depends on other people focus on particular areas. They might mention the childhood briefly, but this is, say, for instance, if you've got a musician, the childhood is interesting, but then really people want to know how they got into music, their early years from being a pub gigger where they might have 20 people listening to them, right up to Wembley Stadium where they've got 20,000 people
yeah,
listening to them, and,
yeah,
and the aspects in between.
yeah,
So I think you still have to hook people with a non fiction.
Oh, I'm sure you're right, and I think your
Yeah.
four E's are
Yeah,
very.
I don't think it matters whether it's fiction or non-fiction. I do believe that when you read a story, the the writer is taking you by the hand and leading you through the story.
Mm,
So I think you can put it in any order as long as you can sort of take people on that journey to understanding why it is the way it is.
mm.
And some of the most interesting books have sort of been upside down and, you know,
But there are films. There's one called The Blind Side, with Sandra Bullock, that was based on a true story, about a boy who was large, wide, and really tall, and he ended up being a American footballer. And I think it was set in a very small place in America, and she was really supportive of him. And it starts at the end, and then literally the first 5 minutes is now, and then the rest of the film is how they met and how he got into American football, and so on.
Yes,
So
I mean, in cinema, I mean, a lot of good biopics are
mm,
based on flashbacks and forward, aren't they? And
mm,
as you say, starting with something and then going back and forward.
yeah.
I don't know if it's more easily done on screen, but it often works well.
Mm. I think it's just how you feel, because if you know Andrea, you know NASA, Malcolm, you know what you know of your great uncle and your father, from spending time with them back in the day to what you've learned thereafter. So I think you are both best placed to know what works and how it naturally feels that, as you say, Andy, that you've gone on a journey. um, Malcolm, have you found, once you've finished the book, how's your journey? How's your journey thereafter been? Because you had help um, publishing the book. How's your journey been since the book came out? What kind of thing have you
If I'm honest, at times quite tough and frustrating.
done?
I think the hardest thing is to build your readership. I mean, a second book is easier than the first.
Right.
In my own case, the first book has more surrounds to it, if you like. There's a story about Africa, and there is a readership that is interested in Africa and colonial times and
Mm,
so on.
mm,
The story about my father, you can't say to people, well, you must read a book about Worthing, although
right.
I have got
I,
a few people who love
I
Worthing,
love
but
Sussex.
it's not
Sussex.
everybody's cup of tea.
No.
My own upbringing was in Golders Green, which I didn't often talk about, but then Golders Green is now in the news a lot for the wrong reasons.
Right.
I had a peaceful upbringing in Golders Green, and it was quite a cosmopolitan community.
Mm,
We had Jewish friends, but it wasn't all Jewish, but it was a mixed community,
yeah.
and I had good memories of it. My mother lived there most of her life very happily.
Mm,
Now it's in the news for the wrong reasons.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, marketing, getting the book out there is the hardest part, if I'm honest. I do talk to friends as much as possible, but you don't want to do it all the time, and you can't bore people with it. It's got to come naturally, hasn't it?
Yes.
But
No.
meeting yourself and being online and so on, and I've got to do more to try and get into some literary festivals in the autumn.
Mm,
Um, but it's not easy. My publisher has been writing to some of them for me. He's not had a huge uptake, if he's honest.
mm,
I've got to do likewise. And again, the only way I've had success in the past is if you get lucky and you get to know somebody who says, "Oh, well, maybe I can fit you in," and what's the book about? And they take enough interest, and then
mm,
maybe you can get a conversation and whet their appetite.
mm.
You can't always. You've got to, but I think you've got to try and have the, yeah, it's selling, isn't it? Selling. I used to think selling was a bit, who wants to be a salesman? But
Oh, I
actually,
wouldn't.
we have to promote what we're doing if we believe in it, and that is sort of selling.
Yes. Well, it's
I,
lovely.
I, oh,
I was just going to say, it's lovely that you're both working on another book, because the saying goes, nothing sells your last book like your next one.
right, okay. But I had a complete meltdown, and it shows from the cover onwards. My name is really tiny at the bottom.
Mm.
I really couldn't call myself a writer, and I have been published in other books, and I blog, and I have regular articles in magazines. I really couldn't call myself a sort of an author of a book. And I went into a bit of a mental dive. I was really insecure and worried about it, and I think that's why I made so many mistakes with the publishing journey. But never again, I've learned. But yeah, my name's really in tiny print. I just didn't want to be there as a writer.
I think we are our own worst critics when it comes to,
Yeah,
especially fiction, because you have two people, and one will love your book. This one, Serial Data, I call my Marmite novel, because when that was traditionally published back in 2018, and it was with a crime publisher really, and it's a women's fiction book, so that I got it back in the end. Um, and I did look at the reviews. I tend not to look at my reviews, but I did look at them then, and I had a 1-star review that said, I don't normally leave reviews for books, but this one was so bad I felt I had to, which made me laugh, actually. I thought that was funny, and didn't lose a wink's sleep through it. And the same book was a blogger's favourite book of the year, and they read probably,
yeah.
even if they read a book a week, that's the favourite book out of 52. So
Big pat on the back. Yeah.
exactly, yes. Well, thank you, both of you. It's been lovely to see you again,
Likewise.
both of you,
Thank you.
Andy and Malcolm, and hopefully see you again in the not too distant future. I know I said this yesterday, to you, Andrea, because you weren't originally booked in on this, but good luck with your Achilles heel,
Yes. Yeah.
your operation,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah. I'll be able to run a marathon on both legs when it's
excellent.
done
And
with.
have you ever run a marathon? Because I broke my ankle on a very romantic beach walk in Shoreham, not that far away from Worthing,
No.
3 years ago. And I said, well, now I can't run, but I never did.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I
And
always, when you mention Worthing, I always think of a certain handbag.
yes,
Ah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
yes, the importance of being earnest.
Yes.
Well, I hope that if you do head over to Syria, that you get there safely, you're there safely, and you return to us safely.
I'll have somebody looking after me when I'm over there, by the
Good,
way.
good. Anyway, so we'll see. Yes, see you again soon, hopefully, both of you. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Malcolm.
Thank you very much. Thank
You're
you.
very
Nice
welcome.
meeting you. Nice meeting you.
And
And
you.
thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Bye bye.
Bye bye.